What are the most isolated cities? Who lives in them? And why? By the way, I'm not just talking about any old shanty town in the boonies, population 25. I'm talking real, big, booming cities with at least 100,000 residents. Some have over 1 million. Yet there are rarely any flights and no roads leading to many of them. Aha! Maybe that's why so many people live there. Maybe they are actually stuck. Either way, these are the 10 most isolated cities in the world. Number 10. Reykjavik, Iceland. We begin our adventure in Iceland's capital, Reykjavik, which has around 131,000 residents. It lies 1,325 kilometers from Aberdeen, Scotland, and 1,336 kilometers from Glasgow, Scotland, the two closest cities. The closest landmass is Greenland, but no one lives there. Despite the remoteness, people have lived in Reykjavik since 872 AD because, well, it's gorgeous. And it's not even that cold considering how far north it is. Everyone wants to go here too. There are tons of international flights coming and going every day from literally every major European and American city. Well, at least there were, back when tourism was actually a thing. Number 9. Anchorage, Alaska. Anchorage is another cold, dark, and isolated city, with just under 400,000 people living in the metro area. The closest city to it would technically be Fairbanks, Alaska, at only 360 miles or 580 kilometers away, but considering that it only has 30,000 residents, it's really more of a big town at best. Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, on the other hand, would be the closest real city at 2,236 kilometers away. Now, technically, Anchorage isn't so isolated, as you could drive here from Vancouver or even the lower 48 states, but it would take a very, very long time, and the journey is dangerous, especially during the winter when temperatures in remote Canada and Alaska can dip below -50 Fahrenheit. How do you even survive that? Number 8. Jayapura, Indonesia. Oh, enough with these cold places. Oh wait, did I just say Indonesia? Yes! Finally! Somewhere warm! Oh wait, that's a little too warm. Oh no, that's way too warm. I can't breathe, I'm sweating! The humidity! I'm melting! That's right, number 8 brings us to Jayapura, Indonesia. Population 315,872. Well, at least. Weirdly, the city is actually closer to the capital of the Philippines, with Manila being only 2,852 kilometers away, than to Indonesia's own capital, with Jakarta being a whopping 3,673 kilometers away. Yeah, there's definitely no roads leading here. But since Jayapura is on the Indonesian half of the island of New Guinea, you can technically drive into another country, Papua New Guinea. Good luck reaching its capital, Port Moresby, though, which at 1,050 kilometers away is the closest city to Jayapura. While technically on the same landmass, there are very few roads on the island overall, and no roads or flights connecting the two cities. But considering that most of the island is a giant volcanic mountain range, with certain peaks even receiving snow despite the island being tropical, it makes sense.
Okay, so if we can't get to Port Moresby, then what's the next closest city? We can surely drive there, right?
Well, Darwin, Australia, at 1,546 kilometers away, is the second closest city to Jayapura, and there obviously aren't any roads leading across the ocean.
Well then, what about flights?
You may ask. And they do exist, but the fastest trip from Darwin to Jayapura would involve at least 3 layovers and 30 hours of travel time. Yeah, that's not my ideal type of vacation. Number 7. Darwin, Australia. Speaking of Darwin, it's really isolated in its own right. The 10 closest cities are actually all located over 1,500 kilometers away in Indonesia. Well, unless you count Dili Timor-Leste, which is only 720 kilometers away. But does this really look like a city to you? Darwin sits at the northern tip of Central Australia, which, like much of Australia, is rather remote. The closest major Australian Australian cities would be Adelaide or Perth, and each are over 2,600 kilometers away, and even farther by car. Adelaide's a 30-hour, 3,030 kilometer drive, while a road trip to Perth will take you 40 hours and cover 3,850 kilometers. Oh yeah, and there's also pretty much nothing in between. Well, unless you count dirt roads, because a lot of the route isn't even fully paved. And if you thought,
oh, no worries, I'll just fly everywhere instead.
Darwin doesn't have a very big airport, which means plane tickets are more expensive, and there just aren't many flights. The only cities that Darwin flies to daily are Sydney and Brisbane. Number 6, Urumqi, China. If you thought a road trip to Darwin would be brutal, don't even think about going to Urumqi. It's incredibly difficult to access by road and even harder to get to by boat, considering that the nearest coastline is 2,240 kilometers away. It's actually the most landlocked city in the world. I wonder if any of the 3.5 million people that live here even know how to swim. Located in China's far northwestern region, Urumqi is surrounded by desert and mountain ranges. But not only is it physically isolated from the rest of China and Earth, it's culturally isolated as well. This is the only major Chinese city where the majority of the population is Muslim and all of the signs are written in Arabic. It's no surprise that the residents aren't so fond of Beijing and the Han Chinese either, which often results in riots and violence. So how exactly did this angry little city, well, little by China standards, even get here in the first place? One word. The Silk Road.
Hey, that was 3 words!
Anyways, the Silk Road made the city a transport hub for travelers back in the day. Think of it like a big bus station in one of the most remote places on Earth. And while I don't know of any actual buses that go to Urumqi, if there were, the stops would be something like Almaty, Kazakhstan at 867 kilometers away, Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan at 1,061 kilometers away, Barnaul, Russia at 1,094 kilometers away, and Novosibirsk, Russia at 1,291 kilometers away. This is, of course, taking into account that the bus driver would actually be able to find the road, because a lot of them look like this. Yeah, that's a road. I think. Number 5, Honolulu, Hawaii. If Urumqi's on one side of the world, Honolulu feels like it's on the opposite side. I mean, everyone here knows how to swim. But if there's no bridge to Jayapura, Indonesia, then there's definitely no bridge to Honolulu. Can you even imagine a 2,300 mile or 3,700 kilometer long bridge from San Francisco? Because that's the next closest city. From a pure distance standpoint, Honolulu is actually the farthest city away from any other city in the world. And the competition isn't even close.
Wait, what? Then why is it only number 5? Your lists are so stupid, they make no sense!
Calm down there, Buster. While Honolulu is technically the most remote major city distance-wise, it's also one of the most accessible locations on this list. Before the pandemic, tons of domestic and international flights from all over the world would fly in and out multiple times a day. So while the next few cities may not be quite as far from the rest of the world, they are much harder to get to. Number 4, Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, Russia. You guys don't know this, but that literally took me 28 takes to pronounce properly, and it's even harder to visit since there are no roads that lead here. In fact, the only regular non-stop flights are the 9-hour flight to Moscow or the 3.5-hour flight to Vladivostok, with weekly flights to Anchorage and Tokyo during the summer months due to the growing tourism industry. Speaking of which, if you ever stumble upon a chance to visit this city, or anywhere on the Kamchatka Peninsula, go. This volcanic, untouched landscape is honestly one of the most beautiful, well-kept secrets in the world. But back to Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky's remoteness. Let's just say if hypothetically we were able to get enough YouTube ad revenue from this video to be able to afford a private jet with unlimited fuel that could take us anywhere, the closest major city to Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky would be Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, 1,321 kilometers away on Sakhalin Island off the east coast of Russia, which itself is already very isolated. The 180,000 residents of Petropavlovsk are actually closer to Alaska than to Moscow, which is an incredible 6,773 kilometers away. Number 3. Perth, Australia. Ah, good Australia. With the continent this isolated, you didn't really think only one city would be making this list, did you? We may have mentioned Darwin, but don't even get me started on Perth. 2 million people live here. 2 million. Which, yes, might be small for China, but it's very big for pretty much anywhere else. There is no city of comparable size on Earth that has managed to be this isolated. Perth's actually so isolated that it's quicker, easier, and cheaper to fly to Bali than it is to fly to the east coast of its own country. And to drive to the east coast, you'd have to cross the vast and desolate Nullarbor Plain, one of the most uninhabited regions on Earth where temperatures can reach 50 degrees Celsius. That's 122 Fahrenheit. But then again, who would want to leave Perth anyway with all that sunshine, sand, and delicious food and wine? Number 2. Iquitos, Peru. Over 500,000 people live in the Iquitos metropolitan area. But maybe that's because they don't have much of an option, considering there are no roads leading in or out other than a 65-mile dead-end stretch to the town of Nauta. Iquitos is actually the largest city in the world that can't be reached by car. If it wasn't so hard to leave, I'm guessing there would be a lot less people here, because the living conditions are terrible. Starvation isn't uncommon, and workers' rights are entirely non-existent. Now, there is a small airport with direct flights to Lima, but the most common mode of transportation here is by river. The shortest journey to outside civilization from Iquitos would be upriver to Yurimaguas, but even that takes 4 days and still requires a drive over the Andes Mountains. And don't expect that journey to be by cruise ship either. Larger ocean-going vessels will take a lot longer than 4 days. The mouth of the Amazon, where the river meets the Atlantic Ocean, is over 3,700 kilometers away. Now, before we get to number 1, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you want to see any more videos on isolated places. Also, I wanted to give a quick honorable mention to Noumea, the capital of the French territory New Caledonia. In the last census, this little island city in Oceania had just under 95,000 residents, barely missing out on the 100K criteria for this list. But if you want to go there and find out if they've passed 100,000 people by now, you might run into a little difficulty since it's 1,484 kilometers away from the nearest city, Gold Coast, Australia. And you only have one chance per day to catch a flight from Brisbane, Sydney, or Auckland, or one flight per week if you want to fly in from Tahiti. But without further ado... Number 1. The most isolated city in the world is also probably the most predictable place on this list. Books, movies, and even video games all send their fictional characters here for the infamy of isolation. Yes, it's in Siberia. Yakutsk, Russia, to be exact. If you want to visit any of the 311,760 Siberians that call Yakutsk home, however, it's practically mission impossible. If you started in Russia's capital, Moscow, the 8,250 kilometer drive here would take you roughly 108 hours non-stop. Yeah, 108 hours. And don't expect to take a shortcut either. There is only one road leading to Yakutsk, and it's nicknamed the Road of Bones since so many Gulag prisoners died building it due to the extreme weather conditions and lack of available resources. So while most of it's technically able to be driven on year-round, you'll definitely want a few extra tanks of gas and some good car insurance first. The road looks like this most of the way, and there's a bunch of small rivers and ponds that now go over the road. Oh, and did I mention that that last little stretch of road over the Lena River is only open during the winter? Why, you might ask? Well, because Yakutsk couldn't be a normal place connected by, say, railway. Oh no. It's connected by frozen river. At least you won't ever have to worry about falling in, though, because Yakutsk is -30 Celsius on a warm day in winter, and